Now, I'm sure many of you out there are familiar with Chronos watches. If you're not familiar with Chronos watches, well, it is the brand of watches being made by a factory in China. There is a factory that actually made the Exciton watches for James and I called the Lug U factory. That factory has a watch brand called Chronos. It did used to be Lug U watches, but yeah, I helped rebrand, or we all helped rebrand Lug U watches to Chronos watches, didn't we? And there is an official store on AliExpress. Now, on that store, you will find other watches, not just Chronos watches. And quite often these are watches made by other brands, but made by the factory that owns Chronos watches. Are you following me? Apologies if I'm not explaining it very well, but basically the factory that makes the Chronos watches and owns the Chronos watches brand also makes watches for other brands, including Swiss brands as well. They do a lot of case work and bracelet work for some Swiss made brands, believe it or not. And anyway, they've just sent me the first or debut watch from a brand called, I think it's Boasia. I'm just going to say Boasia. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. And when I was first offered the opportunity to review this watch, I saw immediately it housed a Miyota 8000 series movement, and the price at the time was $280, and I fed back straight away. Well, I thought it was the right feedback anyway. I just said, look, I think this watch is too much money when you consider the movements that it's housing. I think there is a price cap for AliExpress watches that house the Miyota 8000 series movements, and $280 for me, doesn't matter how well made the watch is, it was just too much money. So they've dropped the price to just over $200. So I thought it was well worth getting this watch in to see if it was worth the $200. And I got to say, first impressions are it's big, but boy, oh boy, do they make well-made watches. I mean, the Exciton watches that they made for James and I were incredibly well finished. The Chronos watches are incredibly well finished. All the watches that seem to come out of that factory are incredibly well finished, and this one is no different. It is beautifully finished. And the bezel on this thing is quite mesmerizing, isn't it? The dial, that sort of copper color that they've used on the applied indices, and the hands, gorgeous, just gorgeous. I'm not completely sold on the overall design of the watch, but yeah, there are some features to this watch that I love, absolutely love. That bezel is incredible. That top surface that's polished, just stunning. And because it's been done by this factory, yeah, the steel finishing looks really, really good. And it needs to. When you design a watch like this with all these facets and sort of flat surfaces and angles, it's got to be well done. And they've executed it perfectly. Now, this watch is so big that they've been able to fit the day-date complications on the inside of the dial, and you've still got a full-sized applied index at the 3 o'clock. It's listed as being 43 millimeters in diameter, and it is 43 millimeters. I've measured it, but because of the shape of the case, it just wears much, much bigger, doesn't it? Cases that have corners that sort of have these sort of rounded square cases, if you like, they just wear much, much bigger. Sometimes a 38 millimeter case styled like this can wear like a 42 millimeters. So yeah, looking at this watch on my wrist, it looks massive. So this is one for the big boys. And really, I'm not going to complain about the size, because I complain about the size of watches too often. And why shouldn't people with larger than average wrists every now and then have a watch perfect for them? So yeah, if you like big watches, beautifully made watches like this, oh, it's good. It really is actually very, very good. And it's not just the finishing that's impressive, the overall specifications are good. I mean, just little touches like the double-ended quick-release spring bars, beautiful. The end link fit, really, really nice. The bracelet is gorgeous. I think actually they could have had some more polishing on this bracelet, or just some polishing on this bracelet, because I think the case can carry a bit more bling on this particular bracelet. Normally, I'm complaining about polished surfaces, but with this particular watch, I think the odd polished facet on this bracelet would have suited it. And it does come supplied with a butterfly clasp, and quite often I complain about those as well. But with watches like this, with sort of, I don't know, dressier, all stainless steel watches, I think butterfly clasps work well. But you must include some smaller links or some way of adjusting the length of the bracelet to a more micro level. Now, the links on this bracelet aren't the longest. They're not your sort of standard 10mm links. They're a little bit shorter, but still, I'm not seeing any shorter links. I'm not seeing any ability to really fine-tune the length of this bracelet. So I'm hoping they'll offer shorter links in the future. But it does come with a second strap, a leather strap, very nice buckle. I mean, just a beautifully made strap. The colour matches quite well. I like the colour of the stitching. It's quite decorative. But yeah, just a shame about the missing shorter links, isn't it? Case back's nicely done. Yeah, some specifications on there and what looks like the logo. So yeah, no complaints there. The crown action is okay. The crown stem must be pretty long because the case is so broad. So the crown does feel a little bit unsupported, we shall say. I wouldn't say wobbly. It just feels like it's on a long stem, to be honest. But yeah, the winding in action and the unwinding action of the crown is nice enough because it is a screw down crown, 100 meters of water resistance with this watch, which I think is fine. Again, there looks to be some sort of logo on the crown, which is a nice touch. The crown guards, very, very nice. A mix of brushed and polished finishing. I mean, there is, yeah, a really nice mix of finishing on the case. The bracelet is a bit one-dimensional in terms of it just being completely brushed, but yeah, I mean, the overall build quality of this watch is really good, really, really good. Huge piece of sapphire crystal protecting the dial. I have tested it. It is sapphire crystal. I'm not seeing anything in the listing referencing AR coating, so doesn't look like there is any AR coating on this crystal, and if there is, it's not particularly strong. There is lume, however, and yeah, I'll show you the lume degrading at the end of the video, and we'll know whether or not it's any good. So I think in some ways this is a very good debut watch by this particular brand. There's just been a couple of oversights, I think. The lack of smaller links in the bracelet. I mean, the bracelet links are 7mm, so they're not massive. You're likely to get a decent fit, but yeah, I just like to have a really, really specific fit. I'm quite fussy, so it is something I'm going to complain about, that lack of smaller links. The movement, if you want to charge closer to $300 for watches like this, and to be honest, the finishing could carry that sort of price, but if you do want to sell your watches for $300, I don't think you can be using the Miyota 8000 series movements. And for me, I said I wouldn't complain about it, but just the size, I think, yeah, you're ruling out a lot of people when you make a watch this big. Well, in terms of its dimensions, it's not massive, is it? But with it having that sort of square case, it just looks, yeah, bigger on the wrist. But guys, yeah, let me know what you think in the comments section. And yeah, as always, a massive thank you from me to you for tuning in. I do appreciate it.